I often find myself thinking back about the games I loved in the past. Whether it's the epic set pieces, the story twist I hadn't seen coming, or that one crazy moment I created myself in the heat of battle. It's the predictable but standout moments that come to my mind first. I recently had a similar situation thinking back to Red Dead Redemption, but I realized it brings back memories for me that are unlike any other game. It's not the explosions, the intense duels, nor the violent gunfights that I'm left thinking about. The image I see in front of me is one of John Marston, riding his horse surrounded by empty lands. All that's left to accompany him along the journey are the sounds of wildlife and the subtle music that's playing in the background. Red Dead Redemption achieved something that truly made it feel special. It perfected the sense of atmosphere. The feeling of being on your own, exploring a large world with many dangers on the road ahead. It's a world that feels stuck in the past, but won't be able to escape the changing times for much longer. The year is 1911, and rapidly evolving technology is threatening to bring the era of the Wild West to an end. Indeed, it is the atmosphere that will forever define my memory of Red Dead Redemption, but at the same time, I realize it would almost seem unfair not to immediately think back to its engaging story, the satisfying combat, the characters only a company like Rockstar can create, and I can go on a little longer. It's been 8 years since the game released, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. Red Dead Redemption truly was an unforgettable experience that up until today I regard as one of my favorite games of all time, and this is how the journey all began. "2010 was a very different time for me compared to now. I was only 15 years old and the amount of money I could spend was limited at the time. Therefore, I used to make my decisions on the games to buy very carefully. Either it had to be a franchise I already knew I liked, or the premise had to be so appealing that I almost couldn't go wrong. At the end of the day, the only thing that mattered to me was that I definitely did not want to risk wasting the little money that I had. When Red Dead Redemption came along, I was extremely skeptical at first. Sure, I knew Rockstar Games as a great developer already, but that Western setting? Today I look at it as a plus, but at that age I didn't think so at all. It sure didn't help that one of my other most anticipated games had just been released a week earlier. Skate 3 was the easy pick. I loved the previous installment, but ultimately my small budget forced me to make a choice. It would be the first time I purposefully went in against my own principles and decided to bite the bullet. The reviews were great and I figured it was time not to make another safe choice, but to try and broaden my horizon. I went to the store, picked up Red Dead Redemption, came back home and started playing. That skeptical feeling wouldn't go away for a little while. The opening cutscene immediately sets the tone. Being sent by the government, John Marston boards a train on a quest to hunt down the remaining members of his former gang. Waiting to arrive at his destination, he overhears the conversations being had by several people. An older woman mentions how she can't wait for civilization to finally be brought to this savage land. A young child speaks to her dad about the rumors she heard of mankind having apparently found a way to make cars fly. The father doesn't buy it though. It's a long cutscene that gives you a great sense of awareness about the current times that you're in, yet simultaneously makes it clear this game is not afraid to be slow. The few hours to come all but confirm this.
I'm an uneducated killer, sent here to do all I can do well. Kill a man in cold blood so that another man may do his part to cut crime in an area, and a rich man can be elected governor on the back of these promises.
Civilization is a truly beautiful thing, Mr. Marston. Listen, can you help me?
Well, I can try. What do you need, money?
No, nothing so complicated. I need an extra hand to take out the herd to pasture.
Sure. Point me in the right direction.
The first couple of missions are meant to show you what the life of the average cowboy would actually look like at the time. That life didn't involve any shootouts, hog-tying enemies, nor chasing down Indians every day. You patrol the farm for coyotes, herd the cattle and chase down cows that leave the group, drive to the nearby city to pick up medicine. Rockstar knew that players would have a heavily fantasized image of these times, and the first thing it wanted to do was to take those expectations away and catch you by surprise. In retrospect, I can't help but appreciate that about it, and I have to applaud them for taking this direction, but as a new player back then, I was quick to judge and almost immediately felt I had made the wrong purchase. Fortunately, the pace would quickly pick up as you started to get introduced to more characters. Before I knew it, I was helping the local sheriff to free hostages from bandits. I took part in five-finger fillet, arm wrestling and blackjack matches to win some money, and I'd cleared the many gang hideouts that were spread across the land.
I see one!
Fucking dang pig! Them cocksucking son-bitches escaped the other side of the fort!
Alright, let's go.
Here's the thing, these activities were never overwhelming. I see so many companies nowadays that make the same mistake over and over again. They use their open world as an excuse for an endless amount of repetitive content, hundreds of icons that are spread all over the map, waiting to be completed for barely any reason at all, but to extend playtime. But that's not the case here. Rockstar understands, like no other company, that the world is there to create the atmosphere. It provides a setting that serves as the backdrop for the content that truly matters. The combat was incredibly satisfying. Using the Deadeye slow motion ability would allow you to mark targets and take them all out in quick succession, and with each new level acquired would only become better. Despite a large range of weapons, from shotguns to pistols, or my favorites, the rifles and repeaters, you could physically feel the impact every time when hitting an enemy. The only area in which it somewhat lacked were the controls. Running was mapped to a phase button, making it hard to look around you in the most hectic situations. The shooting itself almost required you to use the lock-on aim feature that was therefore turned on by default because the standard option felt more clunky than it had any right to be. It's especially now, 8 years later, that when I go back to the game, these imperfections immediately stand out. But despite a few flaws, it was still a very fun game to play. All of these elements smoothly carried over to the multiplayer. I'd spent countless of hours in free roam, forming a posse with some of my friends to grind the hideouts and get the maximum level. The competitive modes weren't exactly revolutionary, but the way each match would start was certainly exciting. A free-for-all game would begin with all players standing in a circle, looking at an opponent and ready to pull the trigger. As soon as the timer hit 0, gunfire would follow. Once a last person was left standing, that player would be granted a bonus and the game could actually begin. The DLC had me just as hooked. I played through all the co-op missions, found myself regularly sitting at the poker table with random people online or to play against my friends, but the really awesome addition was Undead Nightmare. It came out of nowhere and at first sounded like such a stupid idea. An alternative storyline with a twist, a zombie infection that spreads across the regions. What I ultimately discovered though is that this was no easy cash grab, but a full-sized campaign with its own story that was almost just as fun and engaging, provided you didn't take it too seriously. At the end of the day though, there is only one thing that will forever define Red Dead Redemption for me, and that could only be John Marston's journey. He's one of the most relatable protagonists I've ever seen, and you really feel his struggle. He's a guy who's done many bad things in the past, things that you as the player only get to hear about. After all, the story picks up long after John abandoned his former gang in hopes to better his life. But it's exactly now, years later, where the government pressures him to eliminate the last of his living former partners. Otherwise, great harm will fall upon his wife and son, who they've taken captive. It forces John to re-enter the life he so desperately wanted and fought to get out of, in search for ultimate redemption. But the real power of Rockstar is to be able to create so many supportive characters that left a huge mark as well. For example, one of the first people you meet is Bonnie McFarlane, a woman who saves you early on in the game. She's not that heavily emotional character you'd expect to see in many games today, but is honest, self-capable, and not quick to judge. These are character traits that make so much sense, taking in mind the environment around her. Then there is someone like Nigel West Dickens, who is the exact opposite, a man hiding behind his lack of cleverness by playing smart, which gets him in trouble all the time. He's just a fraud, trying to deceive people for money, and sometimes I couldn't help but laugh at the lengths he would go to achieve his goals. I could go on for a little longer, because while the list of characters you help along the way is quite large, every single one of them is memorable, yet so different from one another.
Put them up!
Irish, what are you doing?
Who the hell are you?
Give me that. I'm your old friend Amnesia.
Oh, good blimey!
And I've come to tell you, if you ever pretend to forget my name or your debt to me again, I'll make sure you reach heaven before these two ladies. Now get down there!
Oh, Mr. Marston. How are you?
Ashamed. Ashamed to know you.
What's just as memorable are the locations. It's weird to realize how small and insignificant the town of Armadillo should be when you compare it to the overall size of the map. It's a small place, there is a safe house and a couple of stores, but that's about it. However, its placing, right in between everything else, made it feel like a hub, the safe place I'd always found myself returning to, so I could breathe for a little while before going back on my way again. Over the course of the entire game, there is all this talk about technology rapidly evolving, the era of the Wild West coming to an end, but it isn't until later that this becomes visibly clear. The first time I entered Blackwater was a pretty mind-blowing experience, because the contrast could not have been bigger. Cobbled streets with lampposts, telephone poles, and the first cars that just came out of production. It was such a vast difference from the open landscapes that you would only see up until now, making you finally understand that the cowboys were truly close to the end of their time. Red Dead Redemption was a calm game. This wasn't GTA, horses didn't have radios, the only sounds you heard were those of animals making noise in the fields, or a simple whistle tune softly playing in the background. But that's when you would cross the border and enter Mexico for the very first time. You ride around the land while taking in the difference in color palette and the massive rock formations in the distance. It's the first time you'd hear an actual song being played in the game, and that exact reason is what made it so special. It's a moment that's still talked about to this day.
It's so far away. It's so far away.
The final act brings everything to a fitting and satisfying conclusion. While I won't give anything away for those of you who still want to play the game, I can only say I love these last hours. The pacing drastically slows down again, and the journey comes full circle in an epilogue that feels like it lasts forever. The way that post-game exploration is handled doesn't just make a lot of sense, it's a genius practical solution to a problem I hadn't seen any game manage to tackle before so naturally. In the end, what I appreciated the most about Red Dead Redemption were the simple moments. Of course, I had a great time dueling bandits, playing poker, and hunting down targets to collect my bounties, but if there's one thing this game proved, it's the importance for an open world game to perfect the atmosphere above all else. Red Dead Redemption truly was an unforgettable experience, not despite, but because it took its time. Thanks a lot everybody for watching yet another video of mine. I really hope you enjoyed it. I've obviously taken somewhat of a different direction with the channel recently, and if you enjoy everything I've been doing, then please consider supporting me at patreon.com/robingaming. For just a single dollar per month or more if you can miss it, you get some really cool rewards in return. For example, there is actually a 40-minute Q&A that's up right now for every single supporter out there. I have a relatively small channel, so your support is simply necessary in order to keep making content like this. So if you appreciate what I do, making these videos for you all, please go and have a look, because I would really appreciate it in return as well. With that being said, thanks a lot for watching everybody, and hope to see you again next time.